Hello and welcome to the National Stadium in Kingston, Jamaica for this special edition of the Jamaica Observer's Sports Club podcast. My name is Donald Oliver and it's a special edition because we're looking back at the last two performances by Jamaica's Reggae Boyz as they aim to qualify for the World Cup next year in the USA, Canada and Mexico. Right now they are on top of the group, only by a point over Curacao. They are on 9 points. Curacao on 8, Trinidad and Tobago in third position in the group on 5 points, and Bermuda, they're at the bottom of the table, yet to register a point. I am joined by Brian Pitter, one of my good friends, as well as Daniel Blake. We reunite after the World Championships and what we did and create havoc during that time. Welcome again, but let's talk some football now. And I know that you're very much versed in what the Reggae Boyz have been doing because you actually went to Curacao. Must be nice, right, to travel to Curacao? It is a beautiful country, by the way. But you did witness a loss by the Reggae Boyz, 2-0, the scoreline there. I want you to just give me a small recap of it because some people say that there was an overreaction while others are saying we should never lose to Curacao. Based on the fact that you're right on the sidelines, what are your thoughts on that game?
I think that we didn't play as badly as people say, but I definitely believe that there were some tactical things that should have been done a lot earlier. I think from the start, the team selection was a bit concerning for me when it came to the midfield. When I look at Curaçao's midfield, who have been very established over the last year or two, Leandro Bacuna and his brother, as well as Comenencia, they are a very good midfield pair. To introduce a brand new midfield with Ian Frey as your holding midfielder, Bobby Reid, who you end up playing there that doesn't usually play there, and John Russell, who you have established as your number 8/box-to-box midfielder. You're now asking him to play number 10. So if you looked at the first maybe 20 minutes of the game, Curacao, they just took advantage of that, and even throughout the game they looked pretty comfortable. It was only until we started to going for it and Curacao started to sit back a little bit that we saw more of an impetus from the team. But I think team selection was probably the biggest fault. I don't think that is where Bobby Reid needs to play, especially in an inexperienced midfield. I think that this is something that you try in an international friendly and see how well it works, but then to do it in an important World Cup qualifier, and then to have players like Karoy Anderson and Jashawn Anglin, who you may not have as your first choice, but when you play central midfield your whole life, it's much better than a quote-unquote versatile player in Bobby Reid and asking Ian Frey, who is just getting used to the national team. So I think that was the major downfall. There were maybe one or two opportunities that we could have converted. The VAR goal was ridiculous, but I think overall our performance was not great, and I think the midfield was key to that.
Yeah, of course, our first choice midfielders weren't available. Isaac Hayden, of course, being chief among them because of suspension, I believe. 6 changes were actually made to the lineup, which would have won their first 2 games in this section of World Cup qualifying action. And maybe that would have been a red flag for you, Brian, that so many changes had to be made because there is going to be a question of cohesion and the players knowing each other. But there's also a question about whether the quote-unquote big-name players, when they come back into the system, if it's an automatic choice for them to just run into that starting lineup. Is that the case in your opinion?
Well, it's a pattern that we've been seeing happen before. I mean, if the big-name players are injured or suspended, they usually come straight back into the team despite how well their replacements are performing. So I think that's something Steve McLaren will have to really consider. It was really impressive for him to actually start Dixon and Nicholson. I know that a lot of fans were calling for both of those players to start. Dixon, whenever he comes on as a substitute, he impacts the game really well. And yesterday we saw his qualities really shine. He started slow, but as the game went on, he was impacting the game a lot. Linked up well with Shamar Nicholson. We know those two are really good friends on and off the pitch. So the chemistry was there to see, and Boza back into the starting 11, getting a goal. He scored recently as well. This is his 21st goal for Jamaica. So it's not that he can't perform, but when he has been given opportunities, in the past before, he hasn't really taken it. But he took it last night, and it's going to be a headache for Steve going forward when Leon Bailey comes back into the team, to see whether he will start Leon Bailey, for example, especially with Whisper's cameo towards the end of the match last night, and with Whisper's cameo in Curacao. I think he's going to have to really look into that and see what best options to pick going forward.
We are going to look into some detail as to what took place on Tuesday night in that matchup between Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago right here at the National Stadium. But just talk to me, Daniel, in terms of the approach by Steve McLaren in selecting the starting lineups and what do you think is going through his mind. Every international team goes through the the experience of having limited time together, so they are unable to really express themselves the best way that they can because of the fact that they do have a lot of time. There's little cohesion to look at, but I get the impression that Jamaica suffers it more than most.
Yeah, and to be fair to him, since he's been here, he's never been able to name the exact same starting 11 at any point. And a lot of that is down to injuries. We've seen that Leon Bailey has been in and out. Demari Gray has missed the September, and he was supposed to come back here and got injured as well. And, we've had some unfortunate injuries, so I will give him that. However, I think that there is a hesitancy from him to fully blood inexperienced players. Brian made a good point about Kaheem Dixon. Kaheem Dixon, since McLaren has been here, hasn't really gotten a start. He's always come off the bench or gotten a few
Providing the
minutes.
cameos.
Yeah, but he always has that buzz, and then he will say, well, the team needed more energy today if they didn't play very well, and the energy was there. So I think Curacao was a good lesson for him to learn.
Was it an anomaly?
I wouldn't say an anomaly, but I say lesson because I think now he understands that there isn't a set place for any particular player. And so I think that even if Demari Gray or Leon Bailey comes back, I don't see them automatically starting.
What? Really?
Well, if I was the coach,
if I was
Steve McLaren, I wouldn't see them as an automatic starter.
Okay.
Typically, we would, because arguably those are our two best attacking players. But after seeing what Cephas has done to me, I even feel like Tyrese Campbell was hard done by not starting in the Bermuda game.
He was one of the better players in Curacao.
He was the best player in Curacao. Whisper, who was initially excluded from the 26, was produced to me the best individual performance we've seen at the National Stadium in years. So now if you do bring back Gray and Leon for their quality and experience, I don't think it's an automatic you're going to start, because I think that the players have proven that they can perform. And I think that's something important about international football as well, is that you don't really have time to spend with the players. You have a couple training sessions, so what you see on the field you should take. So I think Cephas should continue. I think Whisper, Tyrese Campbell, Kaheem should continue, and then you see where Demari and Leon slots in, and not just in the attacking positions as well, but defensively, because Greg Lay, to me, I think was great during the September window, and he comes back in October, and Amari Bell just comes in and didn't have the greatest of games. So I think the Curacao game was definitely a lesson for him, and I hope he learns it, because I think November, when the pressure comes, knowing that Trinidad and Tobago is still in with a shot, I think if they had lost the Curacao game, then maybe we would have had more confidence. But knowing that they're right there and playing Curacao in our last game, I'm hoping that he makes the best decisions possible after seeing the players performing over the last two games.
So the thing about us, right, is that when we react, it's never subtle. So there's either an overreaction or there's an underreaction, right? And we operate in extremes. So while there probably was an overreaction to the defeat in Curacao, is there an overreaction
Overreaction.
to
Yeah.
the win over
Yeah.
Bermuda
Yeah.
on Tuesday?
100%. You know, as I've been saying, Bermuda are ranked 165 in the latest FIFA rankings. Yes, we beat them 4-0. We beat them 4-0 in the previous match that we played them as well, but there's a reason why they have 0 points on the board. They're not. They're arguably the worst performing team in the entire final round. But kudos to them, it's the first time they've qualified for the final round in their history. So their program is a little bit behind our program. So they're on their way up. But the reality of the situation is that we are far more experienced and far better than they are.
Right.
So the performances that we saw last night, we should put it into that context. However, it still is impressive that the team managed to play that cohesively. There are times throughout the match that we saw the link-up plays that we've been asking for, the aggression, the intensity that we've been demanding from these players out there. It's not like they can't play football, but usually in the past few matches when they go, they seem to be very, they don't seem to be performing how we know they should perform. The quality isn't there. These are players that play. Some of them play in the best leagues in the world, the top against top players internationally. So they should be performing much better. But last night we can say that we saw a lot of positives from that performance.
And what I'll say about the performance is I wouldn't necessarily say it's an overreaction, but I think it's one of those games where if we had just come away with a win or if we had drawn, that would have been, detrimental. So I think when you have these opponents, you go out and win because, to be fair, I think that this game should have ended 8-9-0. Kahim Dixon had, I believe, an opportunity to, just on the edge of the box after he had beat two defenders. Cephas had a few opportunities himself. So I think that these are games that you have to go out and win convincingly, which they did, because if they didn't, there would be a different conversation that we're having now. Despite moving to the top of the table, despite having control, there would be a genuine worry. So I think it was good that they looked so professional. And I think, again, it was good for the attacking players to have that cohesion, because I think
to
that
be able
was
to express themselves like
exactly
that. Yeah.
Because that, a lot of football is mental as well. So even Kahim Dixon, he now goes back to Crawley Town thinking, wow, I performed extremely well in a World Cup qualifier. I'm going to go back there and I'm going to keep this momentum there. So when I come back next month, the coach is thinking of me. Same with Sifa, same with Whisper, even though he's playing in under 21s. He might even give Maresca something to think about in the first team. So I think this was a very was a very good performance, despite Bermuda not being the greatest. I think it was needed for our mental boost heading into November.
Ronaldo Cephas, I think, probably had his easiest game since he left Charlie Smith Comprehensive, right? Because he was just flying along that left-hand side and just pretty much having his own way. And we hear all the time that football is such a confidence sport, and attackers especially thrive on it. But there's also false confidence.
Yeah.
And that's my concern, right? You can do it at the National Stadium in front of 16,000 people, but what happens when you go to Port of Spain? What happens when you come back home and it's a must-win game against a team who defeated you by 2-0? What happens then? Do they have it?
To be fair, Cephas has really blossomed into a really important player for us this year. Referencing the Unity Cup, he performed extremely well, came into his own, and has since really been one of, if not the only, bright spark in the team. One of the things I'd like to see more from him is to be more consistent. But that is what Cephas offers. I don't think there's a profile like him in the region, and we are really blessed to have the qualities that Cephas has. So it's really just playing to his strengths, as McLaren always says. But individually from the other players, as I've said before, on paper we have the best team in the region. So we should be performing better than how we have been. And the last night, I think the players should use that momentum to drive themselves forward into Port of Spain when we go into Trinidad, because it's not going to be easy. Trinidad might be on 5 points, they might look down and out, but we're rivals. They'll want to have
Arch
an upset.
rivals.
Arch rivals. They'll want to cause an upset. They'll love it if they are the ones that stop Jamaica from qualifying for the World Cup next year. So we have to keep that in mind. And if we lose and Curacao win, they're back on top. And then that game on November 18 seems a lot harder, I should say, going into it. And mentally, we know the Reggae Boyz, they've
Can be
struggled.
fragile.
Yeah, they can
Yeah.
be fragile. So we want to make sure that we set ourselves up the best way we can. So the Port of Spain game in November is going to be really, really important.
There's a tendency to think that once the big name players return, they walk into Steve McLaren's starting lineup. I'm not sure if you agree with that, because the thing with young players is that they will always be inconsistent. So if they have a good game this week, you can bet your bottom dollar that the very next game they will have a not so good game. So you rely on the older heads, you rely on the more experienced players who know how to get things done, especially at the highest level, to perform in a national setup. It hasn't necessarily been the case. Leon Bailey being one example, he hasn't really produced at the national level as he would have produced at the club level. But what are your thoughts in terms of the best 11 for Jamaica, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think your premise is very good. Usually, when
Thank you.
experienced players come in, they should be the first name on the team sheet. But Demari Gray over the last year and a half hasn't produced like he did when he initially came in. Leon Bailey himself has been inconsistent.
Although he has gotten a little better in the last, well, before his retirement, he was coming to come, so to speak.
I mean, I'm looking at Leon Bailey as the Aston Villa 23-24 Leon Bailey, which is somebody who is virtually unplayable, who had Arsenal, United, City defenders on their knees. I've yet to see that from him for the national team. And I think that is why I'm hoping, like I mentioned, that McLaren will use Curacao as a lesson, because I don't think that you have any more automatic picks. I think right now, especially going into those two important games, everything is about the performances that you have seen with your own two eyes. I think, to me, the only players who are maybe guaranteed a spot is Andre Blake, because he's the best goalkeeper in the region. I think Ethan Pinnock and Richard King have proven to be a solid defensive partnership, and Lemby Kisa, there is nobody who I see displacing him. Isaac Hayden and Casey Palmer. I think after that, you use the performances that you've seen over the last 2 weeks, and I think attacking wise we have been improving despite Bermuda not being the best of teams. But I think you go in with the mindset of, okay, Whisper played great, Kahim played great, Cephas played great. So it doesn't mean that if Demari and Leon comes back that, all right guys, thank you, we'll just bring you on and see what we can do from there. It's like, all right, let me see what you all can do, and I choose the best from there. So obviously using club form as well over the next 3 weeks will be important, but I don't think, especially when it comes to the forward line, that there should be any walking from, whether it's Leon Gray, even Michael Antonio if he ends up getting fit. I think we need to use the performances that we've seen over the last week and a half.
And there needs to be an understanding of the arch rivalry of it all, right? Because the passion isn't there with a number of our overseas-based players when you mention, oh, we're playing Trinidad and Tobago in Port of Spain. You'd probably get a different reaction from a Shamar Nicholson as opposed to a Demari Gray as to, oh, we're facing Trinidad and Tobago, we have a point to prove. And Gray is probably looking at the situation as like, oh, Trinidad and Tobago, and probably look at the ranking and, doesn't understand the gravity of the rivalry. Is that something to consider as well?
Definitely, and that's why, the onus is on, the senior players like Andre Blake, Damian Lowe, the ones who are born and bred in Jamaica, to kind of emphasize to their teammates that this is a must-win match. We have to go in with a different mindset that we can't lose, and these are our rivals. And I'm sure if that mentality is set throughout the team, then the team will understand. But it starts with our senior players, because I don't even think that comes from the coach. It has to come from Andre Blake, our captain, Damian Lowe, those players who have been there and understand what it means. But as I said before, we do have the quality to beat Trinidad and Tobago. And I would expect us to go out there and perform similarly to how we performed last night. But if Leon, one of the things, if I can respond to what Daniel was saying about Bailey, it's so ironic now that one of the players that will compete for his position, or put a little pressure on him, is from his own camp. Craig Butler, born and raised in Phoenix, Whisper. The performance that we saw last night from Whisper, he has to start. He has to start. There is no way you look at, and you even look at the cameo he had in Curacao. He came on and he changed the game, created chances. In just a short space of time, the aura and the confidence that this player plays with on the ball. He wants the ball all the time. He wants to create opportunities for his teammates. He wants to show everyone that he has this talent. That's something that has been missing from Leon Bailey.
But you know what's crazy is that there was a different element to Dujuan's playing style on Tuesday night that I picked up. Because it wasn't all about showboating.
No.
It was about beating his man when necessary.
Exactly.
Because there are a couple of passes that he made were just pristine,
Right. Yes.
I felt, and was accurate to the situation, which is sometimes lacking from our wingers.
Yeah, and that maturity says all you need to know about the quality of the player he is. So I think
You probably have to give Chelsea a little bit of credit, because the training that he's probably been going through to refine his game like that. Yeah,
definitely, and especially since he was out for a year.
Yes,
and
because of injury.
And he's playing like that. So it's going to be a headache for Steve McLaren heading into the final 2 games. I don't think Bailey or Gray walk straight into this team. Gray, we know Gray likes to play on the left-hand side. Cephas, you can't bench Cephas, can you? He's our brightest attacking threat that we have. So it's going to be difficult for Steve McLaren, but let's see what he decides to do.
Let's talk about Whisper for a little bit more. Daniel, of course, you'd have been in Curacao. I think you were there when the news broke that he would have come into the camp belatedly because of the injury to Demarai Gray. And of course, there was some stir on social media before then, created by one Craig Butler, as to the possible reasons as to why he wasn't called up. And then after the injury to Gray, he was called up to the national setup. I'm usually very wary of situations like that, because you wonder if it's going to cause some unrest in the camp. Obviously, would have just been with them for a couple of hours, but in terms of how he was received and his integration into the squad, he's not a new player. He's been there before, obviously. But talk to me about that, because he would have come a day before the match.
He arrived in Curacao on Thursday afternoon, just hours after they had completed training.
And that was their final training session.
So they had training session on the Thursday morning, and he came in the afternoon.
Right.
So basically, the first time he saw them was when they were roaming the streets. Because
not a bad place to start.
So the team, to just get comfortable, they were roaming the streets of Curacao, trying, looking at stores. I was told that he spent a little money, but yeah, he was
on his teammates.
A little.
I'm not gonna. He will have to reveal that part.
He would have to reveal that.
But I think, and we might not see that unless you probably follow on social media. But I think having Shamar and Kahim there made him a lot more comfortable, because, as you know, majority of our squad are UK based, and I think when you saw him in Curacao, pre-match and post-match, he was talking with Kahim and Shamar, and he sort of felt at home. There was a little bit of, like the student who arrives late and everybody already kind of settle and have their own cliques. It was that, but I think after his performance, in that, I believe, 8-9 minutes, I think everybody started to warm up to him, and then having the coming to here to have the training on Sunday, he got even more comfortable. On Monday, I think he had fully gelled with everybody, even the coaching staff, how they were interacting with him. And to have that performance on Tuesday, um, like I've said, that is arguably the best performance I've seen in years from an individual perspective. And I think it was also needed for the fans, because everybody wanted to see him and he delivered. And to kind of contrast that, with what Brian was saying, I think we've been thinking the same of Leon when he plays. We want to see him put on that flair, have that show, but Whisper made everything look easy, and that solo goal, I mean,
The keeper not worth his weight.
no, I think even the keeper was shocked. I'm not going, you know,
Yeah, I can't make any excuses for that.
I'm not going to blame him too much, because I don't think he thought that Whisper would have gotten there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that going forward, I wouldn't necessarily say that he must start the next game, but I definitely think that when you're analyzing, he must be in your thought process more than before, because remember, as I mentioned, he was initially left out of the 26. So it shows that you weren't exactly ready for him to come right now, and he's proven to you that he has. So when November comes, hoping that he stays fit and gets more minutes for the under 21s, and hopefully trains with the first team at Chelsea as well, because I think that if he plays against Trinidad and Curacao, they're going to find it very hard to stop him.
Okay, so it's then now down to the final two matches. Away to Trinidad and Tobago, at home to Curacao. Away to Trinidad and Tobago is dicey. We understand more than likely. Although Curacao got a run for their money from Bermuda, where they did play
they were leading 2-0. Bermuda came back 2-2.
Yeah.
They needed a last minute winner.
Yeah. So, like, we're saying that could be a foregone conclusion, but again, that speaks to the quote unquote quality in this group, and why people have always thought that Jamaica qualifying is a sure thing.
Yeah, but I've always said, ever since I saw the group that we received, I've always said this is not going to be an easy group. And I have to be realistic. You look at how Jamaica has been playing. You know, growing up, you hear about 98. That's all you hear in my generation.
Oh, in your generation.
Yeah,
yes.
not in your generation.
Well, not too far, but I get the point.
But yes, it's all you hear. And you look at the footage, you know, you see the brotherhood, you see the quality of the players that we had in 98. Some say, you know, there's a disparity of quality between that team and now. But the team that we have right now has not given us the confidence to say that yes, whatever match they go out and perform in, they will win. It's always, you know, uncertainty surrounding this Jamaica national football team. So whether that has to do with the quality of the players, the selection of the players, the type of players that we're recruiting to come and play for us.
The coaching.
Okay. There are a lot of reasons many persons can give, but we haven't had that confidence to say, yes, we will win, going into whatever fixture we're going into. So when I saw this group, immediately Curacao stood out. They beat us in the Caribbean Cup final a few years ago. And their program is similar to our program. They recruit a lot of Dutch players who have not, not qualified, but who have not cemented themselves in the Dutch national team. They have a really good coach in Dick Advocat, very experienced. So they're not a walkover. You know, they're probably not the best that they can be, but they have quality. And they showed us that last week, and I don't see them dropping any more points. I don't see them dropping points against Bermuda, and I see them coming here on November 18 and giving us a really tough time. So we have to be prepared for that.
You frighten me when you say you don't see them dropping any more points, because they do have to face us.
Yes, yeah, they do have to face us. So I mean, it's going to be a very tricky matchup. I know that we have home advantage, but that doesn't really mean anything. As I said, how we have performed in recent months, in recent years, what the Jamaica team that we're used to. I can't confidently say that we will beat Curacao here in the National Stadium on November 18. But
can you confidently say so, Daniel?
Not with the Jamaica, no. And
it depends on the 11, right? You think?
It's more than the 11. There are a whole lot of factors that we can't get into because of time, but
Oh, we
I
can stretch. It's fine.
no, well, one thing I will say, and I think Brian touched on it, is the fact that there are games that you would think that Jamaica should be the overwhelming favorites, and the result shows.
Mhm.
I think the history of our national team hasn't proven that. And going into Trinidad, as much as people think that Trinidad is just doing it to stop us from qualifying, Trinidad still have that opportunity, especially playing Bermuda at home in your last game. So Jamaica and Curacao will be battling it here, and quite frankly, Trinidad could have probably wrapped it up by then. Hoping that there's drop points over there. So I think that game is going to be tough. Curacao coming here, I cannot say anything with any confidence. However, I think that we have enough quality to even get by on autopilot.
Wow.
We've been saying it. We have the best players on paper. If we put the best 11 out there, regardless of the tactics that may happen, I think that we should. But there is always the pessimist in me, because I thought we should have been at the 2022 World Cup. But whatever, let's not get back into that. But, I think right now it's about selecting the best squad possible, and then trying to see how best, you use the performances that you've seen over the last week and a half and take it there, because I don't think you take Trinidad lightly. And obviously, Dick Advocat, one of the best tacticians in world football, the man is 78. He's seen a lot. So he knows how to get pressure situations, or get out of pressure situations. Whereas I believe McLaren may not have a similar experience as we've seen over the last 10 years of his coaching.
I know it's funny. It's not so long ago that we were questioning how the Reggae Boys will be playing in front of their own audience, and there's every indication that in here is going to be jam-packed for that final game against Curacao, and we think that's a proper home advantage. It may be unsettling for a few of our own players.
And it's funny because I think we actually play better away than we do at home.
That's the point I'm making.
Because if you look at, even we go back to the Nations League, I believe it was, you remember the game that was washed out before, and we had to play like
the
on the
following morning,
the Saturday morning against Canada, and we lost, and we went to Canada and we beat them there. USA last year in the Nations League, they came here and beat us. We didn't beat Honduras here. We drew with Cuba, nil-all. I was just like, what? So I think there's more pressure when we actually play at home, which is why it's hard for me to be confident saying that we have home
So we are
advantage.
encouraging the fans not to come out in November.
No,
we're not.
I'm not saying that.
We need a full house.
We need a full
yeah.
house. All right.
But the pressure that we personally put on the players, I think they sometimes feel that. And we don't have the culture of England or Europe and South America.
You mean silent in England that
No,
Thomas Tuchel just
no.
criticized?
When I say
that
that,
one?
meaning that was an international. I believe that was a.
It was at Wembley international game recently.
That was a walkover for them. I think if it was maybe a tougher opponent, but we don't have the chanting culture. We don't have the encouraging culture. It's like when them pass the ball back, there's a huge groan, and then somebody feels pressured to be, all right, let me kick the ball up front, play this long ball, and it's just very unnecessary, and it kills the play. So I'm hoping that the atmosphere will be a lot better come November, because I think they are going to need it, knowing the mere pressure itself of qualifying.
But they have to get over that though, Daniel. I think as professional players, they have to realize that Jamaican fans are very expressive and very emotional. And they play, these are players that play, some of them play in England. Pinnock, Bobby Reid, Leon Bailey. They know what pressure is. The English press is not an easy, press to deal with. Those journalists over there, if you're not performing well and if they don't like you, they're going to let you know. And the fans as well. So I think it's just not to try and baby these players, but they need to understand that mentally they need to prepare themselves to perform at the highest level these last 2 games. And yeah.
Daniel, I hate to put you on the spot. Actually, I'm lying. I actually like putting you on the spot. But based on the fact that you travel with the team to Curacao, right? I wonder if you were able to get a window as to how a Rudolph Speed operated with the camp, because he was obviously brought on to help Steve McLaren and be that advisor, so to speak,
Technical advisor
to the national team. And I'm wondering if it's more a technical advisor in the boardroom or actually in training and on the field of play. What have you observed?
He's very much involved. During training, he had conversations with the coaching staff before, then watched from the stands to see, all right, what exactly happened, and then even before minutes before the Curacao game, he and McLaren had a very long conversation. During the halftime team talk, he went in the dressing room and advised them there. And something very similar happened last night, not to the same extent, because I believe he was here in the stands for the majority of the game. But sources have told me that they communicate very often, even outside of just the training and the match. They speak very often. So I think that he has a huge influence, but I think at the end of the day, McLaren, typical English coach, always will have the final say, and he is an advisor, so you don't need to take the advice. So not every decision that you see go right or go wrong is down to speed. But I do think that he has been a positive influence in how the team has been preparing and actually executes on the day.
Brian, final say. I mean, on the whole coaching setup and your confidence in Steve McLaren.
I'm still on the fence with Steve. I rate him. I've always rated Steve McLaren. He's really someone to well respected in the football space. As it relates to his association with Jamaica over the past 2 years, since he's been here, I think he has something to prove, and these final 2 games will decide whether bringing him here to steer this program was worth it or not. I'm sure. There are whispers of him, perhaps getting fired after the Gold Cup. After that, we didn't even get out of the group stages, and he was given another opportunity. So this is definitely his last chance to prove whether he, deserves to remain as our coach. But I do believe that we'll qualify. I mean, I know I've sat there and criticized this team, or I've said certain things, but we're going to qualify. There's no way we don't qualify for the World Cup. We're going to beat Trinidad, and I don't think we're going to lose to Curacao on the final day.
Well, I have been on the record stating that we should probably just sit out a generation if we don't qualify for this World Cup and not play football for about 10 to 15 years. That's just my personal thought, but I think all of us are pretty confident that we will be able to stay in this on this side of the world for the World Cup next year, of course, in the USA, Mexico, and in Canada. But it's been a pleasure bringing to you this edition of the Sports Club podcast at the Jamaica Observer. We are coming to you from the grandstand here at the National Stadium in Kingston, and I want to say a special thanks to Red Stripe in particular for being the sponsor of this podcast. On behalf of the hardworking production team, Brian, Daniel, thanks guys. We're signing out.